Everything you see exists together in a delicate balance.
After the smashing box office success of 2019's Lion King live-action adaptation, which hauled in over $1.6 billion, it was no surprise when Disney went forward with this live-action prequel, Mufasa.
It's time I tell you a story. A story of a cub.
Disney President Sean Bailey even boldly proclaimed, The Lion King could expand into a big epic saga like the Star Wars franchise. There's a lot of room to run if we can find the stories. But there's one huge opportunity that Mufasa missed. I'm going to leave the praise or critique of the film's writing to other minds. My contention is that Disney could have made Mufasa as a 2D hand-drawn animation. This simultaneously would have been the perfect homage to the traditionally animated original movie, and in some ways could have resurrected an entire dormant section of the animation industry, a once dominant art form. There's nothing that captures movement and artistry quite like hand-drawn animation, in its absence since the dominance of computer-rendered animation has been felt. Now hear me out. I know as a corporation, Disney must follow the money, and being made in a so-called live-action, which was really just animation but more realistic-looking, 2019's Lion King raked in the big bucks. So on paper, they would have no reason to change, but 1994's hand-drawn Lion King raked in over $968 million, which adjusted for inflation is over $1.8 billion, so profitability is not the issue here. But corporate entities might argue that 3D computer-animated features didn't exist yet in 1994, and that with the emergence of 3D, tastes have changed. They might cite Disney's attempt at a 2D animation resurrection with The Princess and the Frog in 2009, which didn't perform in the box office. This is the exact sort of profit-chasing art form bias that Brad Bird faced while working on The Iron Giant for Warner Brothers. While facing all sorts of shifts in the company, the leadership at Warner Brothers no longer approved of Brad Bird's efforts because of the box office failure of one of their recent 2D animated features. This ridiculous number-crunching approach of course fell apart when Warner Brothers realized that they had a genuine masterpiece on their hands that they had failed to market properly.
At 6 months, we had a presentation. They chose to go forward and greenlight it because they were thinking, Quest for Camelot, which had been very painful for them and expensive, and the morale was low and all this, but they were thinking that it might work at the box office. And so they greenlit us, then like 5 months later, Quest for Camelot came out and tanked, and that's when they would have killed us. And it was cheaper for them to finish the movie than to shut it down. We had a screening finally, right before we were done, and we got the highest test scores they'd gotten in like 15 years. And by then, the ship had sailed in terms of promoting it because they hadn't laid any groundwork, and they recognized that, and they said, let's delay it.
But I don't really agree with the idea that 2D is dead. I think there is a look to it that you cannot reproduce in any other way. I think that we're in a stupid period now where people think that CG equals box office success. And if you look way back to 1995, you'll see that people were thinking that if you took a familiar story and slapped 5 Broadway songs on it, you'd also have immediate success. So everybody and their mother tried to emulate Lion King, and after some horrible films, they all went running for the exits. A lot of those same people are back because they're sure that if you buy a computer, their bad ideas will suddenly not suck. If you put it through a computer, it's great, and it's automatic box office success. So we're in a period of lunacy right now that'll go away once a lot of bad CG films come out, and they're coming.
So what about the 2D hand-drawn animations from the early 2000s? Did they all have some extenuating circumstances that kept them from succeeding? It may help to remember that there was an internal war going on between Roy Disney and Michael Eisner, the CEO of Disney during the early 2000s, each trying to wrest power away from the other. The animated movies in question were made under this thundercloud. Lilo and Stitch included some more experimental elements, and early on Disney expected it to break even, or even lose money, so they didn't put too much effort in it, as the animators worked under a small budget and a tight deadline. Movies like Home on the Range just weren't great, and the iconic Emperor's New Groove seems it was destined not to make bank, as its production was a giant sloppy insane odyssey that absolutely should not have spawned such a gem. Maybe it's a video for another time, but Emperor's New Groove didn't even have a script.
Now I feel really bad. Bad llama.
But alright, what if the corporate suits were right? What if Treasure Planet, Princess and the Frog, Lilo and Stitch, and the rest couldn't make money simply because they weren't 3D, and public fascination with the burgeoning medium of computer animation pioneered by Pixar could only leave 2D hand-drawn features forgotten at the box office, choking on 3D's computer-rendered dust, as it were. Even so, if this were true, I think the novelty of 3D computer animation, most associated with the early 2000s, has worn off, and lately many have been mourning the total loss of 2D animation and wishing for its return. And I'm going to go out on a limb and bet that the comment section of this video will only confirm that. The time is perfectly ripe to bank off of nostalgia for the 2D hand-drawn animation of everyone's youth. Nostalgia has never been more powerful in the film industry, and having a property like Mufasa in 2D just adds to the marketability by calling back to a simpler time in everyone's childhoods. So what happened to the hand-drawn Princess and the Frog? Why didn't it perform despite being favorably reviewed and remembered? Pixar founder Ed Catmull in his fascinating book Creativity Inc. surmised that it had something to do with the marketing, specifically the title. At this point, Disney had purchased Pixar and brought Pixar in to revitalize its struggling animation wing. Pixar oversaw some of Disney's most unique work, like Meet the Robinsons, as they pushed the studio to experiment out of their stagnancy. In his reflection, Catmull said that one factor was that the title Princess and the Frog had princess in it, which immediately signaled to moviegoers that it may only be enjoyable for 7-year-old girls, though this of course was not quite the case. Contrast this to Disney's later fairy tale title, Tangled. Now compare that snazzy update of a classic tale to the box office outcome if they had titled it Princess Rapunzel in the Tower, or something to that effect. Movies like these are essentially Disney originals, so they need all the marketing help they can possibly get. Details matter. But these type of details don't matter as much for sequels that ride the wake of already mammoth intellectual properties like Lion King. Disney had a perfect opportunity to resurrect hand-drawn animation with Mufasa, since healthy ticket sales are nearly guaranteed. There's essentially no financial risk here to attempt something bold like hand-drawn animation. But as we saw with Warner Brothers, Brad Bird and the Iron Giant, medium does not determine success as much as story does. Whatever medium it's presented in, people search for resonant human themes and characters they can empathize with. And let's not forget the audience's reception to the live-action Lion King itself. As with all their remakes, Disney was counting on the double-edged sword of nostalgia and curiosity, and that's precisely what happened, judging by the box office. But that curiosity was never followed by admiration. I can't seem to find anyone who loves it as much as the original, or really loves it much at all. Part of that had to do with the less charming, more song-lean approach, but much of this was dictated by the limitations of the medium. I remember seeing the trailer for the first time, and along with everyone else, I was stunned by the images. Each hair, each blade of grass, everything was so real. It awakened that small inner fantasy in all of us of being able to see cartoons, drawings, or paintings come to life. But as I've discussed elsewhere, there was nothing about the story that necessitated it being seen in live action, and in fact the very reason it was originally made in 2D was to cover for the lack of animal expressiveness that live action demands. Despite its beauty, we search for the human in everything we tell stories with, from toasters to lions. It became clear why we need the expressive flexibility of animation that live action inherently cannot provide, as all the things that only animation could do were gone, and photorealism didn't really have any of its own distinctives to add besides making things look prettier. No amount of visual wizardry can cover for a lack of emotional connection an audience feels with the story's characters. So, photorealism was fascinating as a one-time experiment in The Lion King, but to see Disney continuing the live-action experiment for a spin-off like Mufasa is disappointing when the medium clearly didn't win the admiration of their audience or expand the capacity of their storytelling. I didn't always appreciate hand-drawn animation as a kid while growing up with computer-rendered classics like Toy Story and The Incredibles, but in my adulthood I've gained new respect for how it embodies emotion, movement, passion, and artistry. Hand-drawn animation has made its mark on art and film history for well over a century, and deserves to keep on doing so. And after listening to Brad Bird's passionate perspective, I'd like you to hear him explain it in his own words.
The reason to do it is caricature. That's what animation is great at. And caricature is a word that's often used derogatorily, but actually it means reducing something to its essence.
You put a line around a character that's patently unreal, but the line is alive. The ability to touch a piece of artwork, to look at it and know that there was a pencil, a brush between a living being and the paper, to know that that's the only one that's the original in the universe. There's some unexplainable magic in that.